I think my life is somewhere in between Forrest Gump and Jason Bourne. Uh, Unfortunately, it's more on the Forrest Gump side. You're just kind of flowing through it, and if you're willing to adapt and change and see things, then you can experience life. You can really, really have a good time. Doesn't always mean you're happy. Doesn't always mean you're joyful. And I can tell you, May 23rd, 1996, at 4:30 in the afternoon, I was listening to a lecture by a guy who was very small back then. Nobody knew who he was. It was a guy named John Maxwell, who, as you know now, is one of the greatest leadership writers. And I think he sold 300 million books since then. I mean, it's just great. But I was listening to this lecture, and it profoundly changed my life and led me to joy and happiness. And basically, what John said, and I've met him since, and he's actually given me some awards that I was like, oh my God, this guy, I've always admired him. And I got a call from my marketing department one day, said, hey, there's some guy named John Maxwell on the phone. And I'm like, which one? And they're like, that guy of all these books around here. And I'm like, wow. And they gave us an award for, I think, top 30 most transformational leaders in North America or something. And I was so humbled because he didn't know. And when we met and had lunch, I got to share with him, hey, almost 30 years ago, you impacted my life, because I was just some dude in the crowd, and didn't do it. But basically what he talked about back then, this was my pivotal point for finding joy, is he said, a lot of people, when they throw up the Hail Marys or the prayers or the meditative states, whatever, however you approach that stuff, mine was in prayer. He said, you're praying for the wrong thing. He said, you're praying for a desired outcome. You're praying for something to happen. And you're not sitting there saying, hey, universe, God, whatever, what is this barrier that's in front of me that's making it so hard for me to achieve it? He said, you want to get to the other side, but you don't want to face the reality of what's standing in front of you. And I'm listening to this lecture going, well, that's really interesting, right? That's really cool. Maybe I've spent 33 years doing this wrong. You get the old Hail Mary, oh, please bless my dog. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But who's brave enough to say, hey, what is that wall in front of me? What is keeping me from being happy, or from finding joy? And I was having a great career that young, and it was fantastic. But I remember when I was thinking about that, I thought, God, my ties on, because we used to wear ties back then. It's an old thing. A lot of your young couples might not know, but those thick ties, right? So you used to wear ties to work every day. Now, if you wear a tie, they think you're either the IRS or an attorney coming in, so you don't want to wear ties. But I remember thinking my tie was on too tight. And I reached up and realized I had an open collar golf shirt on. And I thought, oh man, why am I so stressed? And then I thought, well, gosh, this guy's right. Maybe instead of trying to figure out what joy is, maybe I should find out what is preventing me from doing that and tackle that, out there. So that aha moment was great. And I'll be honest with you, I'll tell your viewers what happened. I sat there in sort of a meditative state, really, really thinking through this. I use that word now. I would not have used that word back then, but now as I matured over age, I can tell you that's exactly what it was. And I remember thinking through it, and two things happened. I swear, do not think I'm crazy, but I kind of had one of those transcendental moments, I guess, where I felt a color. I swear to you, don't think I'm crazy. I felt a color that was around me. It's a color I was not familiar with. And I like oil paint. And so I know colors. I didn't know this color, but I felt it around me. And it felt really, really peaceful. And then I heard a voice in my head, and it was not Charleston Heston. It wasn't this voice. I'm not even sure it was my voice. I don't even know if I was crazy, but this voice came into my head, and it said this line, and this line changed my life. And the line was really simple. The voice in my head said, why are you so worried about your future when I blessed you so much in your past? And what happened was I immediately changed, and I immediately realized that I was living in a world of scarcity and looking forward and not recognizing this incredible life I was living and what was happening. And now I know, looking back through all the education and research I've done around it, that was social construct. That was letting society dictate how I'm supposed to feel what's happy is. You're making gazillions of dollars. You got a family and beautiful kids and all the cars, and you got everything you want. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean you're happy. But that moment of realization, when I realized, wait a minute, all this great stuff is happening around me. It's almost how dare you look into your future and not think it's going to keep going. Now, it doesn't mean there's going to be some bad times. There's going to be some terrible freaking times, there's going to be some ups and downs because joy is like the sun breaking through the clouds. I mean, it's intermediate, it comes and goes. But if you've got the mindset to realize, hey, man, it's been a great life, even in the worst of times, it's been a great life. And it's just up to me to realize that joy is always going to be there if I seek it and I find it. It's not always going to manifest itself. Like I said, it comes in and out of the clouds, but it's the how dare you moment. And I kind of opened my eyes, and from that moment on, my life changed. And I realized that, yeah, you can be joyful, but it's a decision. Not gonna be every day, but it's a decision. And that decision will override everything else. And that's kind of how I live my life now.
So so you have like this like transcendental moment, which by the way, I find it so interesting. There's all these different like faiths and religions and things of that nature, but at the end of the day, it's like I think God is just like there, and you have like this like moment. And you've obviously had a front row seat in leadership and watching and cultivating other leaders and who are trying to get these results, right? I mean, so much of the world is about getting like these results and that focus on results versus like being present in the moment. What have you found that keeps people from having that moment like you had?
They realize they think they're alone and they think they're the only one to it. And I give this lecture that I love. It's called Time, Space, Reality, and Mission. That every person, every business is going through time and space headed toward their mission, their goal out there. Now, that goal could be just happiness. It could be a certain amount of money. It could be delivering a product to customers. It could be disrupting. I don't know. But you're going through time, space, and you're heading toward this mission. But every once in a while, reality hits. And reality is a big dip in the line. So you're going straight up, and also, whoom, there's a dip. And when I teach this to students or clients, I draw a big square around that dip because you see an arrow going up and then there's a dip. And I say to them, I say, look, I hate to tell you this. I teach doctoral classes in economics. I know, nerd city, right? But this is a very complex thing, this dip in economics. And I say, it's hard to grasp, but I want you to understand this word and what it is. And I write the word's name on it and I turn around and I say, this is what we call the dip in economics. And the dip is called hell. People think they're in hell. And there's two problems with being in hell. And this is what I think prevents people from finding their way out. First of all, you think that you're the only person that's in hell who has ever been in hell, right? That's not true. Every single living, breathing person is going through time, space. They hit a reality on the way to their mission, and it is hell. It is holy hell. But the biggest thing to realize, and C.S. Lewis coined it the best, he said, hell's gates are locked from the inside. All you got to do is walk out. And what we realize is most people, they'll put some duct tape on it and they'll walk out, but they never get back on their trajectory. They can't find that happiness. They can't find that success or that measurement they're looking for in their business because they just put duct tape on it because they thought hell existed today. Hell doesn't exist today. Hell happened a long time ago. There was something that you did in your past that probably needs to be adjusted now based on the reality that if you adjust that, not only will you get back on your trajectory, that trajectory is going to go up because now you've eliminated an obstacle, whether it be the mindset of scarcity or whatever, you've eliminated it. So the doors are locked from the inside. All you got to do is walk out. But if you just walk out thinking, oh, no big deal, whoo, glad I'm out. No. You've got to look back in time. Sometimes it's only 30, 60, and 90 days. Look back in time and say, what did I do 30 days ago, 60 days, 90 days ago that's manifesting itself today that makes me feel like I'm in hell? Oh, I decided I would start messing around with this, or I decided I would make a few bad decisions, or I changed my marketing scheme because I was bored with it, even though it was working, which is number one for businesses now. No, okay, go back and fix that. And then you'll realize that not only do you just walk out the doors of hell swing open and your trajectory toward whatever your mission is even higher. So I think that's what prevents most people from finding joy. They're in hell and they think that they're the only ones there and that, there's no way out. Yeah, there's the door. Just walk. But by the way, if you don't want to come back or next time you do come back, which you will, you want the dip to be smaller, go back in time a little bit and figure out what you need to do. And so when it comes up again, you're ahead of the game and you're thinking about it and you're not afraid to make some adjustments and things. So I think that's why most people don't find joy is they're stuck in hell and they don't know how to get out. All you gotta do is open the door.
So, Don, do you run like an audit, like a 30, 60, 90-day audit in your brain? And then, and the follow on to that is, what are you asking yourself? Because I think sometimes the insidious part within us is that we'll go back and do an audit and it kind of feels like crickets. We're like, I don't know, what was it? Like, was that it? Was that the culprit? Was this? And I was just talking with Beth, my chief innovation manager, yesterday, and she was talking about how she was listening to this podcast and how we all have these little secrets that kind of rumble on. So do you do an audit, and how do you, like, what do you do to get like really clear, like bring it into like 1040?
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, Beth's awesome. So thank you for mentioning her. She's amazing.
She is.
I do an audit, and that audit is based on two things. And if you really want to go deep into psycho and neuroanalysis, it's DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy, or thoughts. First came out in the 70s. It's really starting to take time now. And I'm not that type of doctor, but I do a lot of work in neuroscience. What happens is most people want to go back into the past and spend a lot of time there. If you go to most therapists, they want to unlock your past, help you find your inner. I get that. That's important. That's no big deal. But I'm the type of guy that says, I can't change what happened in the past. I can only live now. Well, somebody please tell me, what is happening and what we need to do going forward. Well, if you're asking somebody else to tell you, there's a real good chance you already know it. You're just looking for somebody to collaborate and to confirm what you already know. So what I learned is the first step of that is radical acceptance. Do not worry about what it looks like. Do not worry about what it feels like. Just accept it. Okay, this is hell today. Okay, this is it. Now I'm going to look back over 60, 90 days, and I'm going to see what I did, not knowing. I certainly didn't want to walk into hell, but I wanted to know honestly what happened. And then after the radical acceptance, then you do what's called emotional behavior or emotional regulation, where you say to yourself, okay, that's reality. I can accept that. I'm in hell and I know why I'm in hell. Let's don't do this again. And I think that's the thing. It's sort of a no excuse thing. It's to radically accept and to regulate your emotions around it. And the umbrella I put around that is just called the honest assessment. Just be honest. I think most people want to defend. I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's just radical acceptance. It's that honest assessment where you don't have to defend to anybody, because there's not a person on this planet that hasn't screwed up life in lots of different ways, right? It's just your turn. And you're not doing it to justify why you did it. You should be doing it to say, okay, what can I learn from the past so I can live today? The only thing that's real is this moment, the present. And then how am I preparing for the future? Well, if I accept the past, learn from it, but I'm living today, then I'm better prepared for the future. So that dip that we call hell will be less and less and less and less every time. And I don't think we ever find the nirvana or the Buddhist, transfiguration. I don't know. But I know that the way to do it is to accept it and to understand that, God, yeah, I wish I did that differently, but I didn't. What can I learn from it? Because I'm living in the present, and how do I use this to prepare for the future? That's how I audit. That's how I do it all the time. And you get kind of numb to it, honestly, where you don't look for it, but you accept it. And there's no judgment, and another thing I've learned when I deal with my clients is most people, when they make a bad decision, at the time they made the decision, they thought it was a good decision. That based on the information they had at the time, based on the nucleus of data, based on how they felt, based on how they looked at their past experience, their current circumstances, and their future dreams, it made sense, or it is worth the risk. Doesn't mean it works out, but you give yourself credit that you didn't walk into this knowing that you're going to screw something up. You made the best decision you could. So it's okay. Just accept it and move forward. I think that's what helps that audit sort of mindset. And you just get better and better at accepting the reality of what's happening. And then you live in the present and prepare for the future. And it just makes things easier. So I guess it's a long way of saying I'm not afraid of the truth. And I don't think anybody should be, because the truth isn't nearly as bad as people want it to be. The bad part is the defending of it. Just accept it. It's fine.
Yeah, you talked about like the what gets in the way of happiness is societal like sort of expectations or structure
Yeah, all the time.
and I find it's also that kind of plays into a little bit this idea of I think what gets in the way of people being willing to just have that radical acceptance is like shame, judgment, which I think comes from the external sort of like, oh, this is how people are going to think about me. Can you talk through when you were going through your journey? What was like a radical acceptance that like you just were like avoiding? Because we all have that, right? It's like, man, like this is a truth that I don't necessarily know that I want to like acknowledge as a truth, but like that was like a really big breakthrough in your sort of like boom, like because it's one thing to acknowledge the fact that like, hey, I need to go back and look in the obstacles. Like, yeah, I need it. Like, there's so much gold in your past, but there's another to actually do it. Can you talk through like what was like a pivotal sort of radical acceptance that you had to accept in yourself that's allowed you to actually propel you into who you are today?
Yeah. Wow. Wow, you got great questions, man. It's the understanding that you're on your own. There are people around you who care about you. There are people around you who support you and going to be there for you. But they're a human being too. They got their own shit. They're dealing with stuff. Everybody's got something going on. That's what I meant earlier about there is no economy. There's 8 billion economies out there, and the complexity around that centers around the lowest common denominator of the economy, and that's the family. You want to talk economics, the most complicated thing out there? Talk about a family, and you will see more economic disruption within a family than you will anything else. But then you start stepping back and going, okay, these are the people that are closest to me. Hopefully, these are the people, the family, they're going to be with me the whole time, but they got their stuff too. And so you look at the end of the day, the people that are closest to you, they'll be with you. But those other people that we tend to worry about, the societal construct, they're not going to be with you. They're seasonal. They're going to come and go. They're going to come in and out of your life. Why in the world do you worry about somebody that in 6 months to a year, you might not even remember their name? And I think that's the biggest thing that we deal with right now is you're right. There is shame. And if there's shame that's internal and you're ashamed of what you did, great, eat it, live with it, figure out how to do it again and get back out there. You screwed something up and you might have hurt somebody, but move on. On the flip side of it, that's rare, by the way. Most people don't do that. Or when it does happen, it's like, oh man, okay. And you get back out and you get back in the fight. But at the end of the day, we create a lot of stuff around us that's not real. And I went through a hard time several years ago, and a friend of mine who is there for me, he told me, he said, look, he said, here's something I can tell you. You make a list of 10 people that you feel are close to you and are going to be on your side. And you make a list of 10 people that are close to you, but they're not going to be on your side of this. The one truth I can tell you is that you're wrong on 50% of both lists. So you half the people that you think are going to be against you are going to be for you. Half the people you think are going to be for you are going to be against you. So I walked away from there thinking, well, first of all, looking back, he was 100% right. I mean, undeniably right. But what in the world was I seeking at that time for, confirmation from a bunch of people who I'm blind? It's literally a blind spot. I don't know how they're going to connect or how they're going to feel about me. So looking back at it during that time, it's emotional, it's ups and downs. You're in hell. You think, oh my God, I'm creating shame. I'm creating all this worry. Why? Why? And you look back at it after it's over with and go, I don't know why, other than I put that thing in my head. And then you realize that happiness is on the other side. And then when you get through the hell, when you walk out that door, you might have a new set of friends, or you might have somebody that's your friend now that you think back on and think, God, man, a couple of years ago, I thought that person hated me. Boy, was I wrong. And so it allows you to continue to navigate through it. And then you start realizing that, yeah, are you going to screw something up? Yeah. Should you be ashamed of it? No. If you hurt somebody, yeah, you need to think about that. That's different. But most of our shame and reflection comes from a problem that is really a solution. And I talk about this in addiction all the time because that's a rampant thing that people have to deal with. And it's not just drugs, alcohol. People can be addicted to anything, right? Well, addiction is not a problem at all. Even alcohol and drug abuse, that is not a problem. That's a solution. So you got to sit there and say, this person became an alcoholic, or this person became a drug addict, or this person's obsessed with God knows what. And we know that's not good, but that's not a problem. That's a solution. Go back and figure out what the problem is. And when you do, all that shame will go away. And then you'll realize that we're all human. We've all got that. We're all dealing with it. We've all got our own versions of the ice cream shop, it's not all vanilla. So you got to look at it and say, man, I just created this thing in my head that it wasn't real when I created it. And reality is nobody cares. You're on your own. So go out there and help as many people as you can and impact them, help bring them along, be somebody that is that touch point in somebody else's life where when they do look back at you, they know what list you're on. You're one of those people that are for them and they can say, I know that. That's the goal. And then when you find that you're giving happiness to somebody else, you get it. And I said this the other day at the end of a meeting. I don't know why I said it, but it just sort of came out. Which you'll find happens as we're talking right now. But I said this to the crowd. I said, there's only one way to get to heaven. And when you say that these days, everybody's like, what's he going to say? What's he going to do? And I said, there's only one way to get to heaven. To help somebody else get there first. And if you can live your life that way, then you'll find that, you're going to screw some things up, but that shame, the guilt, the problem or the solution gets smaller because you put other people before you put yourself and you're really trying to be that person. But at the same time, don't do something you don't want to do. Be joyful, be happy, live in the present, learn from the past. All these things kind of come together. Unfortunately, it took me 61 years to figure it out. But it's okay. I'm a little slow sometimes, but it works.
I'm really curious about this idea of being alone. I'm going to come back to that, but the thing I think about, and as I'm listening to you, Don, is it almost seems like you go back in these audits, not in the form of I'm trying to find the problem, but almost in a loving way of I'm trying to release some tension or some suspension or some friction. And what do you do that allows yourself to lovingly navigate and explore like that problem? Because you're talking about like addiction, right? Because there's clearly something there that is causing like an equal and opposite reaction, right? Like this must be so bad, therefore I need to have this like type of like solution. How do you lovingly have that radical honesty and acceptance when you actually are like really addressing something?
It's the understanding, and I think this is one of these wise lessons that I learned. There's a difference between being convinced and compelled. And what I mean by that is I don't smoke cigarettes. I smoke some other stuff, but I don't smoke cigarettes. Right? So, of course, I'm talking about my cigar habit or my cigar addiction, but maybe some other things. But there's not a person on the planet that's smoking cigarettes that's convinced it's good for them. They know. They're convinced this is bad for me, but they're not compelled to quit until a doctor says you've got a spot on your lung. So most of the time when you look back at things, people are going through these emotions and this shame and this pain. Every alcoholic on the planet knows it's bad for them and they're killing themselves. But what is it that's going to compel you to change? And I think when you look back, and the way I look back at it, I say, is this a convincing moment or a compelling moment? Because if it's compelling, I need to change. I need to make an adaptation in what I'm doing. And it doesn't have to be anything bad. It could be a marketing scheme we're working on. It could be part of a pitch that we're doing. It could be a relationship with a bad client. And like, well, I'm convinced that I'm losing my butt on this client, and they're horrible and I don't like working with them, which doesn't happen anymore. But in the past it had. But why am I compelled? Why am I not compelled to leave that client? Why am I not compelled to leave this relationship? You just want to live in the sewage of convincing when you're looking for that compelling moment to do it. And unfortunately, a lot of times when people are compelled, they're at a breaking point and they realize out of desperation, I've just got to do it. I try to get ahead of that and don't get in there because I don't think anybody on the planet loves that desperate moment of that thing. So if you can honestly assess it, look back, I love your word, audit it, and say, is this a convincing or a compelling situation? Yeah. Then you have a different set of eyes to look at it. And that's kind of how I like it.
Well, I love that. I love that distinction, and I love the ability to kind of put it into two different cans, right? As you're going through your shit, right? You're like, boom, boom, right? I love the organization of that. The other thing I was really intrigued by what you just said is that when you realize that you're just alone, as I think about human beings, especially when you go through like COVID, right? One of the biggest travesties I think that's happened is that the separation of people from other people, right? I also think about, you know, Dale Carnegie, I think it was like chapter 2 or chapter 3. I actually didn't even read beyond that because I felt like he just gave me like the keys of kingdom. He goes, people just want to be listened to because no one ever like listens. And this idea of like to see, hear, and understand someone is to really to be able to love them.
Yeah, to value them. Yes.
And I think about when you're talking about being alone is probably the thing that we actually fear the most. You know what? That we don't have a tribe or a community that like we're gonna die alone. We're going to be alone. It's wild. Beth was telling me about how she did a 7-day silence retreat, and I'm just going, whoa, that just sounds like. And we don't want to be alone. And I'm curious when you had that realization of being alone. I'm guessing that we're just alone. I have to imagine there's one part, man, this is really fear giving that I'm actually alone, but at the same time, empowering because there's a level of accountability. I'm just curious, can you talk through like that paradigm, that spectrum between those two things that being alone causes, yet it creates?
Yeah, wow, that's deep, man. It's wild. I'll back up to the earliest part of your question. You're talking about we are tribal people, right? We just are. And our greatest memories are usually associated with another person. And in fact, and thank you for recognizing, I have worked with the U.S. Army Ranger regiments for a long, long time teaching there. And you talk to some of the older guys who are old and retired, my age. Okay. And you sit there and say, hey, can we talk about Eagle Claw? Can we talk about Operation Freedom? Can we talk about these things? What's interesting to me, 30, 40, 50 years on, is the older guys like me, they're not looking back talking about the technical aspects of the sortie or the mission. They're talking about the people they were with. So, and you can look at Band of Brothers, the great Tom Hanks, thing that came out on HBO 25 years ago, by the way, which is staggering to me. But at the end of it, the end of Band of Brothers, which if anybody has not seen it, you need to watch. It's an 8-episode series of about actually I won't go into it, but it's great. You need to watch it. But at the end, it almost had a documentary feel. So when the episode each week ended, there was about a 2 or 3 minute thing where they talked to the real people. The guys that it was about. Dick Winters was the lead guy in that, and he passed away a few years ago. Every single conversation, they talked about their friends. They talked about the other humans. They talked about, which is where the Band of Brothers came from, right? So that is an intricate part of who we are. That is where our memories are. You rarely, going back to Tom Hanks, unless it's that movie Castaway where you're stuck on an island by yourself for 5 years, or Beth goes away for 7 days to be quiet. You look at that and go, I don't really talk about that or think about the loneliness. I think back, and my most precious memories are with other people. So recognize that first, that that's who we are and how we're meant to be. But part of that, again, loneliness is just like joy. It's fleeting. It comes in and out with the clouds and the sun. There are going to be moments in there, but realize you're an individual. You are a being, a singular being who is collaborating and living this life thing with other spiritual human beings that are walking around. And so, but I think that's just who we are. We are alone. We are individuals, but we get this incredible joy, this incredible opportunity to live this life that we've been given and meet and connect with other people. And that's where our fondest memories come from. But they come from a growth. They come from a flowering of our loneliness. They come from our individual selves and how we interact with these people. Some will be with you the whole time. Some are seasonal, but I think that's how we're supposed to be. So why fight it? Why argue with that? Just realize that there are going to be some times where you're going to be alone, intentionally, unintentionally. It's going to be a feeling. It's going to be a reality. It's going to be a lot of things. I kind of think that's how you're supposed to be. And then you get joy out of those connections. And then I think as I get older and as other people get older, you realize some of these connections are bringing joy. Well, convinced or compelled, I'm convinced this connection is not bringing joy. I'm going to be compelled to complete this relationship, to end it. And in doing so, yeah, I might be alone. Hey, wait, but that's how I was designed to be. So if you get the joy out of collaborating with all these great people, the band of brothers or whatever it is, seek that. But when it doesn't work, even though the compelling moment is you need to change and it's going to mean you're alone, you can find joy in that too, because I think that's how you're supposed to be. Everything else is just, it's ice cream on top or sprinkles on top or whatever you want to call it. It just makes it worthwhile. But I think that as tribal as we are, we're still individuals.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We all buy into the idea there are no coincidences, right? There's cause and effect. And as you talked about, I loved you said earlier, you said if you're in the hell, and by the way, I love this idea. I think so many people are waiting for like when I get to heaven or if I go to hell. And I don't think they realize that every day we have the opportunity to be able to go, we can make it our heaven or hell. But I love that you said, look back over the last 30, 60, 90 days. So if nothing is a coincidence, and I loved you said, whether it's intentional or unintentional, is that I think that this book, The Comfort Christ, if you read the book, it's about this idea of going out into the wild and but having periods of actually loneliness. And the thing that really stuck out to me, he said the leading precursor to creativity is boredom. And so this loneliness is that maybe in terms of it's that you said it's like it's healthy that we need to have it. And that sometimes maybe if we don't have it, like God, universe puts that actually unintentional loneliness into our life so that it actually creates that period of the next sort of crescendo of music, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's accepting the reality too, right? It's okay. I'm alone, but what can I get out of this? Oh, I know I'm going to be compelled to get out of it. Well, how do I get out of it? That door is locked from the inside and I walk out. What is the fuel that's going to get me to stand up and move forward? And it is creativity. And I love it that you said that. So I go back from a scholarship point of view and I look back at it. And, if you want to talk about God, the creator, the Adonai, whatever you want, which little side note is feminine. So which I think that's really cool. So God's a woman, which is cool. But you look at that and you go, wait a minute. What does this mean to me? What does it really, when I look back and think, what is it that I've been gifted to do? And Eric, the Viking, who you had on your show, he taught me this straight up. We were in British Columbia one day. We were walking down the street and it was in fall, which they really do have seasons there. And we're walking out. I don't have seasons where I live in Atlanta. Well, we do have all 4 seasons, but it happens in the same week. So it's kind of quick, but the rest of the time is just the same thing. But I'm in British Columbia with Eric the Viking and we're walking and we were seeing a client, but we were near a glacier lake. And this warm kind of fall, unique breeze came across and he looked at me, he said, "Did you feel that?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "We're the only 2 people in the universe that just felt that. And I felt it different than you felt it." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. But where are you going with this?" He said, "What a gift." And he said, "Isn't that really what we're here for? Is that we're all going to be experiencing this stuff as we go through it. And we're the only people on the universe that experience that moment, that time, the way it is. What are the odds? So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? And how do you get out of it? And it boils down to thinking critically about the next step, which is a nerdy way of saying be creative, right? And this is where I go back to the Adonai in the scriptural tense in any religion you look at. The only time we are described in relationship to God, if you want to refer to that, is God. We were made in the image of God. Every scripture out there says that, right? What that means, we really don't know. But if we're created in the image of God, okay, well, stop for a minute. Oh, that's really cool. What's the only description we've got of God? The creator. So we are created to be creators. So that is who we are. So if we go out and we feel sorry for ourselves, okay, good, give it, take it. Sit there and be miserable for a few minutes, but just a few minutes, and then get your butt out there. And that fuel is to tap into who you were made to be, and that is a creator of ideas, a creator of thought, a creator of opportunity, a creator of grace, a creator of love, a creator of joy. Just go do it. Do you know how you're going to do it? Most times you don't, but that's who you are. So if you're an individual and you're alone, but you do your best and your greatest memories come from the tribal aspect of other individuals who may or may not be alone, coming together, collaborate, you really do excel when you realize that when you tap into that and you give yourself permission to be free, to say, I'm here to be a creator. Now, my path to my destiny, which, you and I have talked about this before, everybody has a destiny. I don't believe in predetermined destiny, but you have a destiny, an opportunity to get there. There's an infinite number of ways to get there. Just like if you want to drive to Orlando, Florida tomorrow, there's an infinite number of ways to do it. Doesn't look like it till you get down there and you're like, oh yeah, I could have gone that way, that way, that way, that way, but I'm still going to get there, right? Enjoy that, man. And think about how creative can I be on the way down? How can I create memorable moments? How can I link up with somebody, even if it's for a second, to make their day better? And if you approach creativity as that's who you're meant to be, doesn't matter what it is. And you don't have to be an artist. You don't have to worry about color schemes and whatever. Just be you. Create opportunity, create moments, create memories. And I think that's what separates us from every other living thing in the universe. Is we, to the best of our knowledge, are the only ones who have the ability to create at the highest levels. And so do it. That's who you are.
So it's really, I love, by the way, this idea of the creator. And one of our podcasts, Jason Henkel, was talking about like sin, that the word sin means like, in archery means like miss the mark. But he said actually sin, going back to, and I can't remember exactly whether it was like Hebrew or Greek, or the origin of the word means like without connection. And so what's interesting, yeah, without, and is that when we're called to be in quote God's image, right, and be the creator, if we're meant to be creators, how do you feel? I feel like a lot of people hide behind, well, God has a plan for me, which to me is always sort of felt like that's kind of opposite being a creator. Like, because you're taking something and bringing it to a higher level, right? Someone's day, bringing it to like what it was to a higher level, an experience, like it being present, right? That's taking something to like a higher level, like you and Eric being in that moment, that glacial sort of like lake and that warm feeling. Like you took that because we actually had a conversation. You took that and you created a higher level. What do you feel like gets in the way of people actually tapping into the creator that's in all of us?
Wow. Whoa, that's deep too, man. You got some questions. I think that's a layered response. So first of all, it's social construct. We are domesticated, and we are told from the time we're old enough to understand anybody, all the way through the system, how we're supposed to act and feel. Now, there's a reason for that, because I think at the end of the day, we're still pretty violent, primal creatures, but through society, we have learned to control ourselves and to work together to advance us better than any other being on the planet we've been able to discover so far. So I think that really that us being together and understanding that social construct is what makes us better, then we also have to accept the yin yang of that. It can also make us worse. And I think in that domestication of it, a lot of people think, oh, this is just how it is. This is my lot in life. And I experienced that, to be honest with you, in a hard, hard way. My parents love them to death. My dad's gone now. My mom's still around, but she's aged. But I remember my dad, his greatest generation guy. I mean, that was a group of people that we haven't seen since then, what they accomplished. And everybody thinks it's the Second World War. Don't forget, they were born during the greatest depression in history. So they survived a depression and a world war, and they did not believe in a better tomorrow, but they believed in themselves, and they got together and they rallied and they accomplished things that we can't even comprehend right now. But all of that adds up into a way of thinking And I know my dad came out, he worked for the railroads for 40 something years. He's a great job, a great guy. He worked 2 and 3 jobs to put me and my brother through school. He taught me work ethics and all. But because of his situation, he lived in a world of scarcity, and he lived in a world of this is just your lot in life. And he accepted it, and he made the best he could out of it. And that was great. I didn't accept it. And I remember one day, and I said, "Dad, I think I want to go to college." And the reality was I was a terrible student. People my age, they didn't diagnose you with ADHD and dyslexia like they do now, and there weren't tools to help you. I knew I was pretty bright, but I just was terrible in school. And my dad knew the same thing. He was like, "You're a bright kid, but this is your lot in life." Basically, is what he told me. And I said, "Well, I want to go to college." So I was the first guy in my family to really go to college. And I remember doing very poorly. And one of the professors said to me, "Look, kid, if this isn't for you, that's fine. You can go work at a fast food restaurant. Nothing wrong with it. You can go do this. You can work your way up to maybe being an assistant manager one day." And I remember looking at him going, "That is your construct on me. That is not how I'm looking at my future." Now, I needed to figure a few things out. And fortunately, some things happened along the way where that creativity was released, that the connections and the people I met, I listened to, I paid attention to them. I wanted to know why I was born a certain way and the guy standing next to me wasn't. Well, then I realized he was. He just made a series of decisions based on a compelling future that other person wanted. And I just realized there is no lot in life. And if God does have a plan for you, that's your problem. You've got to execute it. And the same way would be this way. If you said, "Hey, Don, come over to my house Saturday night. My family and I were planning this big dinner, and I'm going to make it so special for you." And you have a plan that I'm going to come over to dinner with you, and you make it nice and you make it special. And you say, "Hey, Don, what's your favorite food?" And I tell you, and you make it all for me. And then Saturday, I decide not to come, and I don't even bother to call you. That doesn't mean you didn't have a plan. It doesn't mean you didn't have a plan for me. Your plan was to give me an incredible dining experience with all the foods I wanted and all the things that were there. And you invited other people you thought I might like. But for whatever reason, I made a decision. So you had a plan for me, but I decided not to accept it. So I think there's some truth that God has a plan for us, but it's up to us to accept it and try. Try. It is not a free ride. And you're going to go through the ups and downs. And if you believe in scriptural work, if you believe in the text and anything, Christian, Hebrew, Buddha, Hindi, any of it, you'll see that life's a variety of journeys up and down. And even these heroes that we create in scripture, even the Jesus character, it wasn't an easy ride. It was ups and downs. So go back to that. How dare you? How dare you worry about your future? And by the way, you're not going to go through any journey that any hero didn't go through. Even though God might have a plan, you have to execute. So I think a lot of people decide not to, and they use that as an excuse to sit around and just feel sorry for themselves. And you know what? That's fine. God bless you. I'll see you on the other side. The people who choose not to be that way, I think, have a fuller life. And I'm not judging the people who don't. Again, God, I hope they're just happy, whatever it is. But if you choose to execute on your own and you're deliberate and you figure things out as you go, you'll find the joy. You'll find happiness on it. But doesn't mean there's not going to be some hellacious days, weeks, months, years, whatever. It's okay. Everybody's been through it. Go back and read Joseph Campbell's work, A Hero's Journey. Every hero goes through the journey. Everyone. And Lucas used that to write Star Wars. Watch Star Wars and think about it differently. And you'll realize it's just a hero's journey. But what's interesting? Are you a Star Wars fan? Can I ask you this, readers? I'll tell you a funny story. So I went to see Star Wars when it first came out, 1977. Okay. I was 13 or 14 years old. Thought it was the coolest thing ever. You could buy one ticket and stay in the theater all day as long as you kept buying popcorn. So we would watch it 3 and 4 times on a Saturday. And, but if you remember right, Star Wars came out at episode 4, and then they went 5 and 6, and then they went back and did episode 1, 2, and 3. And then they did 8, 9, or whatever it was. Totally out of order. My boys, when they were born, now they're in their 30s now, they were born to watch it in order. So when they started watching it, they didn't watch it like I did with number 4, 1977. They watched it for number 1, 2, 3. They watched it in order. And I remember one day, and this is, I don't think I'm crazy for talking about Star Wars in life, but it is a hero's journey. I remember asking them one day, I said, guys, I said, isn't this cool? This is the greatest story ever. It's about Luke Skywalker and all these things that happen. And they just looked at me dumbfounded. And they're like, what are you talking about, Dad? And I said, this is the story of Luke Skywalker, the great hero, what he did to fight good and evil, the good cowboys, the bad, all this stuff, the dark hats, the white hats, it's the story of Luke Skywalker. And they're like, what movie did you watch, Dad? And I'm like, Star Wars? And they're like, it's not about Luke Skywalker. It's about Anakin. It's about Darth Vader. And if you look at it, number one, it's a little boy, Anakin, and he grows up in harsh times and he makes it to the top, makes a few decisions that don't work out for him, ends up there. But at the end, he's redeemed. And the impact he had on everybody else saves the galaxy. They're like, Dad, it's not about Luke. It's about Anakin. It's about Darth Vader. And I looked at it and I went, oh, that's the hero's journey. And if you go back and watch some documentaries, Lucas will tell you that Joseph Campbell's work greatly influenced him, that everybody in your life has a damsel in distress to save. Everybody has a wise wizard to help you out. Everybody has to deal with the good and the evil, the fight. All that stuff is happening in everybody's life. Which hero do you want to be? That's the decision. You don't have to decide. You can just be somebody who goes through life. God bless you. But you've been given the chance to be something. And God's got a plan for you. I can believe that. But you got to show up to the party, and if we look at things differently, and this messed my head up. I mean, 25 years later, I'm still messed up by this. What do you mean it's about Darth Vader? I thought it was about Luke Skywalker. Nope. We missed that one. So, yeah, it's just how you choose. That's it.
It really is. It is about the choice and the agency. And I think that's the thing that for me that I've always taken, I grew up, my dad was a pastor and that's kind of the thing that I've always given is that he's given us the free will for us to utilize the skills that we have. And the time that I find that I feel like closest to that spiritual world, like that the creator, is when I am in that joy. Because when I'm in that joy, I feel I'm basking in what I liked how you talked about the clouds and the sun, and you feel like the warmness hitting your face, and that to me is like what joy. It's interesting that you brought this all back around to this hero, because this is the thing that I've really been contemplating is this idea of what does it actually even mean to be a hero? I love to hear your definition. And then two is that it's interesting you talk about the harsh or not so harsh, or maybe the harsh reality that's actually really loving is that we're all alone. And I was thinking about this idea of that, and you think about the hero and the hero journey is that it always starts with you're alone. And the gift of that. So how do you define what does it mean to be a hero, right? I mean, because you've been on, I mean, you've spoken and presented at the UN, you were attached to like the 75th, Ranger Regiment, and you've talked and taught at like West Point, and you've been in all these different sort of environments of maybe what they envision a hero to be in the journey that you go. How do you define a hero, and what does that mean to you?
Thank you for that. First of all, my fingers are crossed about West Point. We should know next week. But I've been at Wake, Oxford, Wharton School of Business, so love them all. But no, you're 100% right. I'll tell you the greatest joy I've had, the greatest moment of affirmation where I literally was stopped in my tracks was about 2.5 years ago. My oldest son and now his wife, they were engaged. And I remember it was a Atlanta cold, but it was a cold, rainy day in January. So it was in the 50s. Okay, no big deal, but it was a little chilly. And we were going to have dinner that night, me, him, and my future daughter-in-law. And they said, Dad, we'd love to have dinner. Now, as you know, from being a dad, that means we want you to buy us dinner. I love it. I'll do anything I can to be with my children and their spouses, wives, and whatever. But I remember calling them about 4:00 that afternoon and go, guys, it's rainy, it's cold. I'm an hour away from you. I'll be happy. Can we reschedule this? And they were like, no, we need to talk. And I was like, oh, when your kid says they need to talk, you stop everything and you go to them. Right. And so I'm like, I'll be there. So we went down there and it was a little funny, awkward looking back at it. I was sitting there going, why are we having a normal conversation when you made me drive an hour in this, rain and what's up? And we got to the end and they said, we need to talk to you. And I was, embraced. My first thought was I'm gonna be a grandfather sooner than I thought, but that's okay. It's like, how do we work this in the wedding? But that was not it. It was not that at all. They looked at me and this was my greatest honor. They said, we made a decision about something in the wedding. I said, what? They said, we want you to marry us. And I was like, oh my God. That I was like, can you elaborate on that to make sure I understand what you're saying? And then they said, no, we want you to wed us. We want you to master the ceremony. We want you to be the pastor who weds us. It sucked the life out of me because that's the greatest honor as a father I've ever had, was for those two individuals who are alone. They're coming together in marriage and they want me to be that person who bonds it together. And I was like, oh my God, this is the greatest thing ever. Now, my first question after I calmed down a second was, I looked at my now daughter-in-law, Katie, and I said, what does your mom think about this? I want to make sure everybody's good, right? Because as being a boy dad and you have a wedding, you're not involved. It's the girl at her mom's wedding that you happen to participate in, right? So I'm like, and she's like, no, she greatly approved of it. And in some cases, it was her idea. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's great. Now I had 4 or 5 months to figure out what to say. They didn't want a long thing. They wanted it kind of short and sweet, but impactful. And this gets to the story. I was talking to somebody, a neuro psychiatrist, and I said, well, this is really interesting. I got to do this. And I'm trying to figure out, what to say about this. And I'm trying to, we've got these traditions that, for better or worse, death do you part. Yeah, that's not true. So I want to say something. I'll do the traditional stuff you need to do, right? But and say I now pronounce you. I'll do all that stuff. But I want to say something very short that's so impactful. And I said, I'm trying to figure out what love really means between two people who are alone, who are coming together. And this doctor looked at me and she smiled. She goes, oh, I got it figured out. And she goes, I just figured it out. And I said, what is that? And the definition she gave me for love is the same definition I have for a hero. So this answers your question. What she said love is love is the willingness to sacrifice something of yourself for the betterment of another person. So think about that. What are you willing to sacrifice of yourself purely for the betterment of another person? And she said, that's what love really is your willingness to sacrifice to make somebody's life better. And then it hit me. That's the hero's journey. That is what every hero does. So go back to 8 billion economies, 8 billion individuals, 8 billion heroes. That is when you become a hero. It might be fleeting. It might be a long period of time, but that moment when you're willing to sacrifice something of yourself for the betterment of another, and sometimes it's somebody you don't even know, now you're a hero. And I think that's the purest definition in my side.
I love that so much, Don, especially because literally just 2 days ago, I've always just kind of struggled. What is the real definition? And it's so interesting when you ask people, what does it mean to be a hero, right? There's the American version. It's like Captain America, right? Like, no, that's a hero running into burning buildings. That's a hero, which by the way, it is. And I had said, my take on it had been, I said, I think that a hero is someone who's willing to go through the hard and humble themselves, but for the benefit of others. It's the same thing, and I love it. And the thing that just came in clear to me, growing up, so many of us that maybe we're listening to this grew up in like the Christian faith, is that 10 Commandments, like love thy neighbor. What he's asking you to do is actually step into the hero's journey, right? I mean, in essence, what if you just take that word love and just go, no, what he's asking you, not to like love and just like appreciate, all the Americanisms that we have, but what you just said is, in essence, he's asking you, be a creator so that you can go the hero's journey, so that you can love or sacrifice for the benefit of others, right? I mean,
yeah, and that's the Christ story. right? I mean, and the Bible is full of mythology, and a lot of people don't want to hear that. It just is. And these are stories that are meant to be eternal, so that 2,000 years, 3,000, 4,000 years, it's not, and I tell people this all the time, don't take the Bible literally, take it seriously. Not literally, seriously. And if you take it seriously, you'll realize it's a series of heroes' journeys that are constantly happening. Most of the time it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But what can you learn, from those stories? And what I think is really interesting is we have Americanized in the English version of a translation that's not even in the Bible. But if you look back at the hero's journey of the Christ figure, Joshua, and you say, okay, we know the guy existed. We people believe or they don't believe or they're curious or whatever. And that's all fine. But when we use the term the passion of the Christ, that is actually used properly. But I guarantee you 99% of the people don't know what that word means. They think that it means a love and an affection and something they're doing. That is not what passion, or in Latin passion, that's not what it means. The word passion means that you're willing to do something that basically hurts you. You're willing to take on something that is so hard that you will break because you so desperately want something else to happen. It's the willingness to sacrifice yourself. That's what the word passion means. So if you say to yourself, okay, it really just means that I want something so bad. And I think this is the literal translation. And if you look at Aramaic and Hebrew, which morphed into Greek and Latin, what it means is your willingness to accept and to do something that hurts you and harms you, even for the betterment of other people. That's what passion means. So when you think about it, you know it. Oh, the Christ hero story. That's what he did. He was willing to sacrifice something of himself. That's the arc of the story, right? To make it better for you, to give you a mission, to give you hope, to help you find joy. That's the story. All the other stuff is meaningful, and you can pull things in and out of it at different times and adapt it for your own interpretation of it. Take it seriously, right? But it's a willingness to sacrifice. That's passion. And if you see somebody who has passion and who's willing to do that to help other people, yep, there's your hero. And are you going to have opportunities to do that? Infinite opportunities. Maybe not as drastic as that, but infinite opportunities to sacrifice something to help other people. That's what passion means. And I think all of these come together, and I think we're all heroes, because we've all done it. But, I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for it sometimes.
The word sacrifices keeps coming in, and I think about, even as I'm listening to this, and I imagine people are listening to this going, man, it's easy to say sacrifice, but it's exponentially harder to actually do, right? Because it means that, like, I'm gonna have to give up something. I'm gonna have to say no to something. And I keep going back to, like, you talked about your dad's generation. They were forced.
Yeah, nobody asked them. You're right.
Yeah, there was no telling, hey, by the way, it's like they were forced into that. And I find it so interesting, Newton's law, equal and opposite reactions, that the greatest generation went through the greatest level of suffering, right? Economically, mortality wise. What was it like during World War II? Like, what percentage of population?
Oh, and in different areas, different parts, 40% in Europe, and in Russia, less than 5% here, but it was the young boys who are providing for our future. So yeah, it was a dramatic response to that. It's horrific, actually.
And so you have, like, these sacrifices. So how does someone in today's world, right? I mean, again, these are all things that I find so interesting. I'm having this conversation with you today because you've been in front of so many young people, men and women, right? You've been in front of, like, the Rangers, right? Who have signed up to sacrifice, right? How does someone in a voluntary world set themselves up with a joyful passion to actually do that?
Yeah. Well, everybody has 1,000 different ways to get to their destiny, right? So I think a little bit of that is the destiny, the wiring, how you're built to do it. But there's this weird paradox going on right now. that is yin yang like I've never seen it. And we can look at this. And I always talk about this to people. You want to understand behavioral economics, just open your eyes and look around, observe, listen to things that are happening. And you'll hear these things from people that you don't think are philosophers, you don't think they're economists or behaviorists or religious scholars. And you're like, crap, that dude was right. Like Mike Tyson, I think he was fighting Clubber Lane 25 or 30 years ago. And one of the reporters, being kind of a smart alecky, and they said to Tyson, they said, hey, Clubber's got a plan. He knows how to beat you. And if you remember, Tyson said infamously, he said, yeah, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And then he goes on to say the next time, which doesn't get a lot of credit, he said, oh no, by the way, I throw every punch with murderous intention. In other words, I've got one goal, and that's to put you down. Now, he didn't want to hurt anybody, but because he's actually a nice guy. But if you look at it, that was his job, and he said, everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face. Now, here's the paradox. That generation, although they were forced, they got punched and they punched back. They were in the fight. So when it came back, they were seasoned to take on things and to be maybe willing and compelled to do things, hard things that other people wouldn't do. Now, you take that generation, and I'm not knocking the current generation. Here's the paradox. We have a generation now that hasn't been punched in the face. So in the United States, the average employee right now in the United States, the average person in the workforce is 39 years old. Now, let's say they started when they were 24 years old. They got out of college. They started, really their career took off. That was the year 2010. Okay. So the workforce that we have now began on average in the workforce in 2010, which seems like yesterday to me, right? They've never been punched in the face. Now, you can talk to individuals here and there, and they can say, oh, well, I had this hard time. Yeah, I know. Did you do what they did? Did you stare down evil? Did you face this stuff? No. So people tell me all the time, we have a soft generation out there. They've never been punched in the face. They don't know how to stand up to this. And you know what my response is? I'm so glad. I'm grateful, because that's why those guys before us did what they did, so that you don't have to do it. But that doesn't mean you don't have responsibilities. That doesn't mean that you're not going to have to be called when you're called. And they said it the other day, although I wasn't really happy with the delivery of the speech, but the only way for peace is to prepare for war. Right. And Peterson says that, although there's some academic arguments around the meek will inherit the earth type of thing, Peterson goes deeper and he says, I really think that's the warrior in the garden mentality. And this is a very true story. It's a question to ask people. Would you rather be a warrior in a garden, or do you want to be a gardener in a war? And what the meek will inherit the earth, according to Peterson, although some scholars disagree with it, what he's saying was, keep your sword in the sheath. You've got your sword, but you just don't have to use it. But you can, and you're willing, because even though you're in a garden, you're still a warrior. And I think all of us are warriors. All of us have that in us. And thank God we've got a generation who's soft right now. Now, looking forward, is that problematic? It might be. But at the end of the day, they did that because those people before you, those heroes who went before you, sacrificed everything so that you can live a life that's a little bit more relaxed, where you don't have to worry so much. We're a little bit more connected than we used to be. And we're going to have to figure this out. The military came to me a few years ago and talking about Band of Brothers. They said, hey, we got a problem. We've got an entire fighting force out there that is not as connected as those prior generations used to be. Can you help us figure this out? We want that Band of Brothers mindset back again. And it does exist, but not to that level. And I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. And so I'm sitting there working on it for days and days and days. And I asked one of my sons about it. I said, hey, what do you think about this problem? I'm trying to solve right here. And he goes, oh, Dad, it's easy. And I'm like, what do you mean it's easy? I've been struggling with this for days trying to figure this out. And he dated me a bit. He said, well, in your generation, he said, when you got to go see the world the first time, although it was almost voluntary, but not really based on my age, he said, when did you get to call home? And I said, well, your grandfather allowed me to call home on Sunday night for about 2 minutes. I could call collect, but that was it. Other than that, it was good luck, kid. And he goes, yeah. He goes, all these people that you're working with and training right now, he goes, how connected are they at home? And I'm like, oh my God, this kid's right. I've seen guys deployed and FaceTiming their wives, and their children, and they're still connected back home. So when you're alone and you're isolated with other people that are alone and isolated, then yeah, you create the band of brothers. You come together. That's your small tribe. But right now, we live in a world where we're connected all the time. I mean, you and I are on this device. You said you're in Wisconsin, right? I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. This vehicle that we're using, where we're both on the screen, this isn't a communication device at all, right? What is this? This is a transportation device. Right now, I'm in Wisconsin. You are in Atlanta. And when people start watching this, when it goes live, it's all over the world. We are literally being transported all over the world with no limits whatsoever. Ugh. Okay. So that changes things, doesn't it? That means that loneliness, that individualism shouldn't, in theory, exist the way it has existed in the past. We're not going to have to find small little tribes to do it. We're still interconnected because we can transport around the world at will now. So, see, the game's changing. So, the individual, the hero, the person that's seeking out these things, it's just going to be a different world. But when people talk about the soft economy, the soft people, what are we going to do? Oh, God, what if the aliens invade from God, some other galaxy tomorrow? Are these people out there going to be able to handle it? I don't know. But I know that we've always been prepared, that we've always mustered up when we had to. And those boys who survived the Depression, who ended up being sent to Europe and the Pacific in World War II, yeah, nobody asked them, but they weren't that prepared for it. They just did it. So I believe that even though we can sit there and argue that we have a soft generation who doesn't know how to be heroes, who doesn't know how to step up, they will. I just believe they will. And thank God they don't have to be that way right now, because that means a lot of people slept in ditches and did things so that they don't have to. And I'm honored because those are heroes. They sacrificed something themselves for the betterment of others. And those others, they didn't even know. How cool is that? That's a hero when you get down to it.
Had no idea the ripple effect, right? Like like those soldiers in Bastogne, right? They had no idea. They had no idea.
Yeah, they're just trying to stay alive, and do bad things to bad people, at the same time. It's really, really hard, to do that. But they're just boys. And I tell you, one thing that my sons, and I talk to them and my daughter-in-laws and all the time, obviously, because we're really close. But the thing that used to irritate them, which I backed off a little bit when I say this, they'll say things about the world today. And I'm like, "Nah." "Oh, what about this?" I'm like, "Meh." And they're like, "Why don't you care?" And I said, "Oh, I care." "Well, why don't you have a more of a visceral response to it?" And this is the line I use. And I said, "Well, I've seen this movie before." And they're like, "What are you talking about?" And I'm like, "This is the worst time in history." And I'm like, "Oh, geez, really?" You think that? When I was a little kid, we used to have tornado drills. We knew damn good and well those weren't tornado drills. Those were nuclear bomb drills, right? And we had to line up and get under our desk and get away from the windows and stuff. And we grew up thinking we were going to get nuked any minute now. And then we stared down the draft, and there was this dark empire, the Russian Empire, the Union of Soviet republics out there. And we're like, oh my God, there's a bad guy. You can't even point to the bad guys now. Or you talk about something in the land so far away, you can't even pick it up on a map. Trust me, kid, I've seen this movie before. We're going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I believe in humanity. I believe in the greater good. Are there going to be moments where the darkness happens? Yeah. Are there going to be moments where you got to remind yourself you're a warrior in a garden? Yes. Are there going to be moments where you're convinced, but you're not yet compelled? Yes. Are there going to be moments when that compelling thing happens and we call together as a tribe to stop something because we believe in our children? We believe in a better tomorrow? Yes. But not now. And guess what? We always survive. We always survive because we've seen this movie before. So when people look back over time, like you said, the relative connections of it and the ripple effect, I think the older you get and you look back and you see the ripple effects in your own life, it makes it easier for you to understand the dynamics of time, the way we measure it, right? And then you can look back and see, yeah, those poor kids, those 18-year-old boys in Bastogne, they had no clue what they were doing. but they were heroes, and they knew they would sacrifice something of themselves for the betterment of others, even though they didn't know who they were, couldn't comprehend that. That allows us to move forward. So that's a movie that's going to replay itself at some time. And I just believe we'll pull up our boots and we'll do our jobs and we'll do what we have to do. So I'm glad we have a soft generation, but I also believe that when the time comes, they'll be heroes too. Hopefully it won't. Hopefully it won't, but it'll be okay if they do.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's like we're on the same wavelength here. Cause I was just going to ask you about in today, cause you're talking about like, hey, these were hard times. And then, and again, I appreciate you actually having that because I think it gives us context. I think that so often we get sucked into the fact is like where our feet are at is the most important time in like history. And you go back to like, I mean, we can go back to long, even before like Jesus time, right? Like there's like that time was the most important time in like history. And, I mean, this is one of the most, abundant times in history that we've ever had. And I appreciate your outlook on it. It's not saying it's not important. It's saying that like it's just important, but we've just seen it before. When I think about this idea of living a max life, right? Because that's what we have. That is all everyone who's listening to what you have, what I have is we have life and we can choose to fill it up or we can literally just use like the bare minimum of what's been given to us. What are the other myths that you see like across your spectrum of as a behavioral economist to as a like global leader in leadership to, you know, an elite instructor teacher at some of like the greatest institutions in the world? What are the greatest myths that you see that people just miss out on living that max life?
Oh, wow. Man, dude, your questions are great. I think the greatest myth is thinking that it's not a myth, thinking that it's more real than it really is. Over time, we create mythology to tell stories. That's all the mythology is. It's a story. And that story, like I said earlier, is not always meant to be literal. It's meant to be taken seriously because you can get something out of it. I think the biggest myth is realizing that are a myth. You know, everything in our life is a series of stories that's led up, to this moment. It is Polinian. You look at things in your past and base your experiences on it so you can live in the present and prepare for the future. But there's a lot of mythology in there. There's a lot of perceptions that are in there. And as much as I don't want to say this, in most cases, there is no right and wrong. There's just a perception of how your ideals accept and tolerate a certain action versus somebody else's ideals who accept and tolerate. And if you both have a different level of tolerance, then it becomes a conflict, and conflicts can erode into violence, and that's wrong. It starts with communication and then organization, and then you can find the middle ground to be peaceful. And I think that's the biggest myth is that people don't realize that everything's a myth, that nothing is real. I had the pleasure a couple of days ago, about a week ago, actually now, a meeting Lech Walesa. And a lot of people don't know who he is, but he was the first democratically elected president of Poland. He was an electrician under the Soviets, and he banded together and he basically unionized the electricians and got arrested, got thrown in jail. So you're not going to do this. That's the darkness of the Soviet Empire. You're not allowed to think. You're not allowed to organize. You're going to sit there and you're going to be army ants and you're going to do what you're told to do. And he said no. And before you know it, they brought down the Soviet Empire in Poland. He becomes the first elected president, wins the Nobel Peace Prize. And there's this great picture of him speaking to the joint sessions of Congress here in the United States and getting a standing ovation from both parties because he was a hero. And fun fact, I went to this and I got to meet him and spend time with him. My ADHD kicked in. I didn't read the small print. Didn't know he didn't speak English, but now we do know. Okay. And I don't speak Polish, but the translator was awesome. And so we got to chat. And he told me, he said, it just begins with a desire. It begins with the desire to be better, to say that, hey, I do think I can do something. And in doing something, it could be dangerous. It could be hard. It could be something that, I don't know what the destiny or the outcome is, but I'm going to stand up because I believe in this for myself, for the people closest to me, but I believe this for everybody else around me. And I said, well, what are the steps? And he said, the first step is acceptance, kind of like I said earlier, which I was like, okay, I'm already there. And then he said, organize your thoughts. And then you organize your thoughts with other like-minded people. And then if the inertia, equal and opposite effects, if the inertia starts to build and you've got energy, then you know you've got something. But then it's your willingness to sacrifice. It's your willingness to stand up to the dragon. It's your willingness to do all these things that will hopefully work out for the better for you. So when I look back over all these time periods and do things, again, that's a movie we've seen over and over and over again, but you get to meet somebody. And you know what I walked away from there thinking? And he's in his 80s now. I remember walking away thinking, what a kind man. But man is singular. He's just a dude. He's just a guy. If he was walking down the street eating a bagel, you wouldn't even notice him. Yet he literally changed the world. And now at 83, 84 years old, he's still going around talking about it to inspire other people to say, don't forget, because it's coming back. We've all seen this movie before, and might not be in your generation, might not be in your children or grandchildren's generation, but it's coming back. And let's just don't forget. But the steps are radical acceptance, organize your thoughts, organize other like-minded people. And then if momentum is there, it's going to be fine. It'll work out. And that's a metaphor for business too. Organize your thoughts, organize around other people. If you've got a product that you think can help other people, it'll take off. It'll do fine. So I just thought that was really cool to meet a historical figure like that, who, like I said, going back, we're all alone. And I think he's been married for 63 years, he told me, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, he's just a dude, no different than me and you. But when he was called, he took his sword out of his sheath and he walked out of that garden and he stood up. And I think we're all capable of that.
I love that so much, especially because the fact that you just realized he's just a singular man who was willing to put his capability, regardless of knowing the outcome, regardless of the safety of his home, because he believed in a bigger future, that he actually, because he reviewed his past, everything he was talked about by reviewing his past.
Yeah. And I believe with all my heart that as we go toward whatever our destiny, the plan, whether we execute and accomplish it or not, whether I show up at your house for dinner Saturday night or not, you had a plan for me and I chose not to. That's okay. Now, that's not real. If you actually did invite me, I'd come over. I'd be happy about it. But we're talking about a little metaphoric synonymy here. But you look at that and you say, wow, what fork in the road popped up where somebody made a decision go this way when they could have gone that way? And what I've decided is that there are a series of constant 2-minute decisions, that I call it the 2-minute decision, where you're moving down toward your destiny, an infinite number of paths to get there. And you're going to have to make a decision. And for 2 minutes while you're mulling over that decision, that's going to change the trajectory of what it is. And what he did when he had that 2-minute thing, I can stand up, or I can actually have a pretty good life as an electrician. Nobody's going to bother me. Everything's going to be okay. They don't care about electricians. I'm going to be fine. No. In that 2 minutes, he decided to go that way. And when he went that way, it changed the world. So if you think about this, so that's obviously dramatic. We don't all have that type of impact, right? But yeah, we do. Yes, we do. And it goes back to that ripple effect you talked about. Those decisions, those constant decisions that we're making, we don't know what the results are going to be. We know there's a ripple effect, the butterfly effect, whatever you want to call it. But at the end of the day, just make a decision, man. And convinced or compelled, just make a decision. You never know where it's going to go. And if your heart says that, yeah, I'm a warrior in a garden, I'm somebody who says I'm willing to sacrifice something of myself for the betterment of others, really don't want to. I could really live my life without having to go through that. It's fine. But if I'm called, if that moment is necessary, I'll be there. So in a way, we're all heroes. We all have the opportunity to do this. And I hope the heck you don't have to. But if you do, I'm confident that the right people will at the right time. And I think talking about living your max life, that's how you get back to it. That you don't have any regrets. Or I take that back. You can have plenty of regrets, but you're going to look at it and say, but I radically accept where I am. And I can look back at the ripple effect I created and find out that it's real. And I'll tell you something on the ripple effect. Another power of observation. We purchased a company 10 or 12 years ago from a family. It was one of Atlanta's biggest technology firms, and a wonderful family. But it got to the point after 40 years of a family business, nobody wanted it anymore. So they came to me and said, look, our kids don't want this. It's time. We want to sell the company. We'd love for you to consider purchasing it. And we did. It was great. It was a wonderful purchase, a wonderful transaction, impacted a lot of lives. I'm really, really proud of that. But I remember talking to the owner, wonderful lady. I don't know how many I think I quit counting at 20 something grandkids. She was telling me, I mean, it's just an incredible woman. And she ran that company. Her husband founded the company, and then she passed away. And I said, look, I said a couple things. We need to talk about this. When we purchased this company, I said, I can't, and I'd say this very politely, I can't sit there and have you over my shoulder. It's time for you to go on. And she said, well, what do you mean? And I said, well, buying and selling companies like buying and selling a house. You can't sell your house to somebody and then go back 6 months later and say you don't like how they painted the front door. It's their front door. They can paint it however they want. Are you accepting of that? And she said, yes. And I said, how do I know? And this is a story she told me, and it to this day resonates with me. She said, look, even though our family founded this company and we got several thousand employees and great company, great brand, great everything. She said, you got to look at life or a company or your existence like a giant thing of water, a bucket of water. Say there's a big, big bathtub bucket of water here. And you, say it's a company, while you're engaged at that company, while you're employed there, you're meeting all these people, your hand is in the water and you're stirring it. You're moving it around. And I said, yeah, I get that. She said, you're creating ripple effects. You're creating energy. You're doing all this stuff. And I said, yeah, I get it. She goes, what do you think happens when you pull your hand out? I said, I guess the water simmers down and it stops moving. She said, yes, till somebody else puts their hands in there and starts moving. She goes, but you need to realize this. The second you pull your hand out of the water, it forgot you were ever there. And I said, oh, she goes, yeah, I'm willing to give you the keys. You don't have to worry about me. It's going to forget I was ever there. And I said, well, I'm not going to forget. I'm going to put your picture up. We're going to make a wall. She goes, yeah, fine. If you want to do a legacy wall, that's great. But she said, that's life. You're going to move on, and you're better off if you realize that, yeah, you're touching people. You're making an impact. As soon as you leave, they're going to forget you were ever there. But the impact, the memories, they're eternal, but they're living their lives. They're doing other stuff. They move on. They accept what the situation is. They're not yawning for you to be back. I was like, oh, wow. And she was 1 billion% right on that. So that's another thing. As a hero's journey, realize that they might not build a statue to you, but you did it. And I think that's one of the great wisdom. I think it's Chinese that, one of the great parables is, wisdom is when you realize that you planted a seed for a tree that you will never enjoy the shade, but somebody else will. And they're not going to know you planted it, but that's okay. You have created something for generations. Well, they will enjoy the shade. They're just not going to remember that you're the one who planted it. And that's perfectly fine. And I think heroes get that. They really do.
That is profound, beautiful, and it's so simple. And this whole conversation is that your aha moment was, we're alone. We start alone. We end alone. And just the radical acceptance of that is what dictates between the difference between okay, good, great, exceptional, right? Of the life that we're living, of like what we do with that. Man, that is really good. That is really good.
And I think if you can wrap that with, like I said, my biggest fear, other than my children I want my children to be happy. That's all I care about. I don't care what they do. But my other fear is I'm going to get to the end of my life and realize I was the same person the whole time. Man, I don't want that. And that's the journey part of the hero, right? The hero actually matures And if you look back at Anakin, you look back at Luke Skywalker, you look back at these stories, you know, you had the damsel in distress, that was Princess Leia. You had the vagabond out there, that was Han Solo. You had the wise wizard, which was Obi-Wan Kenobi. You know, you had the good and the bad and all that kind of stuff. Those people were different. If you read through, you know, Lucas's work and you see Campbell's influence on it, the heroes matured too. You know, the heroes lived a better life. The heroes accepted, you know, what was happening. So if you're committed to not being the same person your whole life, and you really do go out there and understand that your only purpose in life is to sacrifice part of yourself for the inspiration of another, even though you might not ever see the shade, then you can live a great life. But the part of that of being alone is you can look back and realize, hey, I got better. I am happy. I am good with myself because this journey has made me a better individual. So I can look back at my spirit, my soul, and go, you know, we did good. And I saw a guy the other day. I thought it was beautiful. Is an actor who's playing in the Chosen series, which is really good. He's playing Jesus, which is a tough role, you know, to do. One, it's very hard, and we actually have no idea about most of it. And 90% of Hollywood gets it wrong. You know, a first century Palestinian Jew didn't walk around looking like a blue-eyed, blonde-haired European. We know that. But you know, you look at this guy, and I saw him being interviewed. He did a great job, a fantastic job doing playing that part. But he was being interviewed, and they said, "Oh, okay. Well, you took on the role of being Jesus, which is career suicide. You know, he's not going to go play in Star Wars now because they're going to go, why is Jesus in Star Wars? You know, that's not going to work, right?" But they said, when you die and you're standing in front of the Creator, you're standing in front of God, Adonai, and she allows you to ask a question. What question are you going to ask? And he just smiled. He didn't hesitate, but he's very humble in his answer. He said, my only question to God would be, how did I do? And I thought, God, what a great question. How did I do? That is reflecting. That is saying, did I live up to what your plan was? Did I make you proud? You know, did I live the way you wanted me to live? And I'm pretty sure, don't know this for a fact, but I'm pretty sure the Creator is going to look at us if we ask that question and say, you know, were you happy? How do you think you did? And there's not a judgment the way a lot of people say it is. It's going to be, you've been given an opportunity. How do you think you did? You know, and it doesn't mean you want to have the opportunity again. Doesn't mean that, you know, everything's over. It just means you got a chance. And if you can look back on it and say, yeah, I think I did okay. I bumped and grind. I screwed a lot of things up. I hurt people. I helped people. But at the end of the day, I planted that tree. And one day, somebody's going to lean up against it and just have a picnic with their friends. And they'll never know I planted that tree. But in that moment of it, they're going to enjoy that warm breeze. They're going to enjoy that memorable moment. They're going to have something that they can reflect on, and they won't know the sacrifice and the work that people put into it 100 years before. I never knew who they were because I pulled my hand out of the bucket, right? And they forgot I even existed. But if you can go back and say, in that alone, I did something, even though I don't know what it is, but I tried. And I found joy and I accepted it. And in the ups and downs, the highs and the lows, the ins and the outs, did my best. I think you're good. I think you're real good at that point. And I don't know. I just think, and I don't want to be too deep on it, but at the end of the day, it just comes down to that. It's that simple. I just hate for most people that it takes 6 or 7 decades of your life to figure that out. If we could figure out a way to teach younger people that, where they could understand it, wow, that'd be kind of cool, right? So I think that's where mentoring comes in. You get a chance to be the wise wizard now, and you get a chance, and that's what you're doing with this podcast, right? You're being the wise wizard to help other people out, and you don't know the ripple effect. You don't know what it is, and there might be one soundbite somebody gets, and 5 years later they remember it, and they're like, "Oh, this is going to work now." They might not remember it came from you, but you did it, you know, and you can look back and go, "Yeah, I'm proud of that."
Do you remember the movie 13 Hours about the Benghazi? I don't know if you watched that.
movie. Yeah, I knew some of those guys. Yeah, it's a tough movie. Very good movie, by the way. It's very realistic.
There's a part in there where it says all the heavens and hells are within us. And that part just really stuck out to me. And what something that you just said, Don, I thought was just so profound. And the fact is, when we finally get there and we're like, how did I do? Looking for this external acceptance. And he's going to literally go, how dare you? Like he's going to so in almost a way to be able to go, were you happy? Were you in the joy? Were you loving in the form of like this hero's connection of sacrificing or humbling yourself through being the creator for the benefit of others? Like that is just
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. It's very, very real. I'll tell you again, back to Eric the Viking, who I think is one of my best philosophical buddies while he's not doing rock and roll in front of a million people or doing whatever he does. He's just an amazing guy. But when I was really down about something I'm talking about really down, like I could probably clinically diagnose myself, which I know is not supposed to happen, as I was in a depressed state for a short period of time, which is not like me. I mean, I've got energy. I'm positive. I look forward, but the clouds come out sometimes. They just do, right? And he told me this story that I've told hundreds of times, and it meant a lot to me. And again, the mythology, right? Most of the scriptural texts that we work with have been translated and mistranslated and done. So like I said, don't take it literally, take it seriously. That's the shift that we need to do. And he said there's all these other ways of looking at it and all these other stories out there. He goes, let me tell you one. And I don't think it's Bhagavad Gita, but he told me this story that it was like lightning hit me when he told me this. He said, imagine this. He said, imagine that you're a spiritual being in heaven, whatever that is. We really have no idea. And if you go back and look at the scriptural text, they said heaven's up and hell is down. That's because we only understood 3 dimensions, right? We didn't understand that anything can exist in the way it does. So again, don't take it literally, take it seriously, right? That there's something out there. And you're right, heaven and hell are within us. But he goes, imagine before you're born, you're a spiritual being in this plane of existence. And the creator calls you and a couple other spiritual buddies of yours up and goes, hey guys, I got this great idea. And you're like, okay, God, what is it? You're all excited. And the creator says to you, I've done something really cool. Had never done this before. We did this bang thing. We got the universe. It's infinite. We got all this cool. It's really cool. But look at that little dot over there. I call that Earth, or they call it Earth. It's just a little thing, right? But I've created these beings down there, and I'm really excited about it. And you're like, oh, cool. If you're excited, we're excited. Tell us about it. And God, the Adonai, the creator, says, you're not gonna believe this. I got this thing called life. These spiritual beings will be born, which is a weird concept. They will live. They will have highs and lows, ups and downs, all these things. They were going to experience my greatest creation, and that's emotions. They're actually going to know something other than bliss and joy. And it's going to be a great journey for them. And then they're going to get to the end of that journey, and they're going to come back here. So it's kind of like you get to go to a ball game or something. You get to go experience this thing. And what do you guys think about it? And you're a spiritual being, these other buddies of yours around, you're like, that's cool. I want to be a part of that. You mean I get to go experience, I get to play, I get to go play there. It's like going to an amusement park. And yeah, I get it. It's going to be ups and downs, but that sounds cool. We didn't know this emotion thing existed. And God, the creator says, okay, great. You guys are going down there. And there's a couple rules. I got to tell you this before you get down there. Okay. Rule number 1, you're not going to know each other. Down there. Now you might path, and your lives might cross over, and you're going to have a weird little feeling like, I think I know this person, but you don't, you're each going to be on your own. You're going to be alone. And they're like, ooh, okay, that sounds fun. Let's try it. And then he goes, okay. And here's something else, I know it's hard to conceptualize, but there's going to be some bad times. You're going to experience this emotional things, but just remember, this too shall pass. And when I say that, it's not all bad things, it's good things too. So you're going to be really, really happy. You're going to experience this happy emotion, but that will pass. You're going to experience bad emotion. That will pass. But just know, deep down inside, there's going to be a spark that says everything's going to be okay. And they're like, when can we start? That sounds like it's like going to Six Flags for the day. Let's go. And he goes, okay, one more thing before you go. And I'm about to send you. I'm about to snap my fingers. But you need to know this. I'm about to give you amnesia. Bam. In other words, you're not going to remember the conversation. You're just going to experience it. But when it's done, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. You're coming home, you know? And when Eric told me that, and I get goosebumps thinking about it now. When Eric told me that, I was like, this too shall pass. And it's for a greater thing. And when my hand comes on the bucket, it's okay. And I just had this unbelievable peace, this joy come over me when he told me that story, because it released any inhibition I had, any guilt, any shame. Either I had nothing to be ashamed of or guilty of. It was just shitty, you know? And then I realized, oh, this is part of the fun. It doesn't feel fun, but it's part of the fun. And it's part of the grand design. And it's up to me to know that this too shall pass, the good and the bad. But I remembered what Billy Graham, the great, American preacher, said as he was getting up in age. Somebody asked him, "Are you afraid of death?" And he goes, "Oh no, I'm fine with death. I'm going home." And they said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, but the process, man, that kind of disturbs me a little bit." So he admitted, "I'm not bad being dead. I just don't like those weeks or months or days getting there, you know." And I thought that was the most honest answer. But he kind of acknowledged that myth. That was a myth. I don't know. We have no bearing, nothing that tells us a true story. But within our mind, we can recognize that you were told to be alone. It's part of the journey. It's part of the fun. Embrace it. This too shall pass, but it's going to be okay. And you're going to find it. And I think that's part of the hero's journey. That's part of who we are as individuals. That's part of being alone. And maybe that's the mythological perception that you're never really alone. Yeah, you are. The process sucks sometimes, but you move forward. I remember, Dan Sullivan, who you and I both know. He and I were having lunch one day, and this guy joined us. Really interesting conversation. The guy looked a little sad, and Dan said, "Hey, what? You got something going on, buddy? What's wrong?" Dan's kind of the wise wizard, right? And the guy goes, "Oh, I'm thinking about getting a divorce." And Dan looked at him and goes, "No, you're not." And the guy goes, "No, really, I'm thinking about it." And Dan said, "No, you're not." And he said, "Yes, I am." And Dan just laughed and he goes, "No, you're not, buddy. You've already decided you're getting a divorce. You're thinking about the process and you don't like the process, but you've already made a decision. Whatever happened, you were compelled to get to this point. Now you're worried about the process. In the process, this too shall pass." And I just saw the guy's face change, like for the better. Like the stress that this guy was carrying on himself softened a bit because he realized, oh, I'm not upset with the situation. I'm upset with the process. Yeah, the process sucks. This too shall pass. And I think that's part of the hero's journey. That's part of who we are. And your willingness to sacrifice something yourself for the betterment of the others, understanding that this too shall pass. That's pain of the sacrifice will pass, because that's what passion is, is the willingness to accept something because you want something else so bad. You'll accept pain today because you want something in the future. It's just a process, right? This too shall pass. And I think that's way beyond the depth of our humanity. And I think, again, taking things seriously, that things are outside of scriptural text, that you can learn from Star Wars. You can learn from Mike Tyson. You can't learn from these little things that are going on. Oh, how does that apply to me? Well, maybe those little sparks help you get through the pain a little bit faster and a little bit better. And they get you through it with clarity of knowing, oh, I'm the hero. I can put my sword back in the sheath. I can go back in the garden now. That has passed. And I think that's the beauty of all of us kind of on that spiritual story. We've got amnesia. We don't know, but there's something inside of us that says, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And it doesn't matter. I can tell you from a guy who went through seminary, they're all fine. Most of the great religions are 90% the same. The overlaps are all the same. And the overwhelming theme of every great religion out there, with a couple of minor exceptions, is that love wins. And I think that is that ultimate spark, is that the hero, everybody listening to this, love yourself, love your neighbor as yourself, treat them the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated, treat people the way they want to be treated. And you realize that we're all kind of going through this, and highs and lows, ups and downs, it's going to be fine. just a process, that's happening.
It is. Man, that's just so beautiful. I love just the grace and just like radical acceptance that it just is, and it's going to be okay. Hey, Max Life audience. You might think that this is done, but I got to tell you, no, this actually conversation went on for a whole nother hour and 15 minutes. So you're going to want to stick around to next week when we have our part 2 of our conversation with Don Barden. I got to tell you, this is one that you're going to want to continue to listen to. Again, remember, if you like what you see, love what you hear, remember to like and subscribe for more Max Life.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.